Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome, marhaba, shalom. My name is Itamar Feigenbaum. I'm a member of Combatants for Peace, and I would like to thank Gili Meisler for hosting us this evening and sharing with us his story, sharing us the story of losing his brother in the 1953 war. Gili was a producer for many years of this joint memorial event, and he is the manager in new media and communications in the Bereaved Families Forum for Peace. I would like also to thank Miss Mura Tierney from Ireland, who will do the captions for this meeting. For a start, I would like to add some technical details. So I've put all of you listeners, you are on mute and you cannot unmute yourselves. It's a technical definition of the room. Captions will appear as subtitles on the screen. You can see them also as a separate window. You can control it by pressing the CC sign on the control bar of your Zoom window. And then you can choose between show subtitles, or you can see the view full transcript, and then you can see all the subtitles. The chat option is open. We welcome you to write in questions. The questions will be seen only by me, and I will pass them to Gili to answer on the second part of the meeting. So I will pass the mic to Gili. Gili, thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you for having me. That's it, my turn?
The floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Itamar, the gallery view also? Or that's, no, sorry, okay. So, my name is Gili. Let me share with you my personal story. I've done that quite a few times because we are doing that I'm one of the people or one of the members in the parent circle who does that. It's the first time I'm doing it in Zoom, so I don't know how it will be. Please forgive me. Also, yeah, I'm one of the producers, let's say, of the ceremony, not for many years. That's the third or fourth year. We really worked very hard at the past weeks, especially the past 2 weeks, especially the past days, especially yesterday and today. So I'm a little bit maybe not as myself, but I'll try to do my best. So yeah, let me begin. I'm originally from Jerusalem. I was born in 1961. That makes me 59 years old. My parents, let me tell you a little bit about my family. My parents came from the USSR, Russia, in 1958 with their small child, Giora, who was 4 years old. And I was born 3 years after they came to Israel in 1961. We lived in a very simple, modest apartment in a very modest building with lots of apartments. 3 rooms, me and my brother in the same room, 7 years difference between the two of us, most of the time fighting. It was my parents' dream to move to a bigger apartment that they will be able to separate us. Let me tell you a little bit about my mother and father. My father, he was a mathematician, actually quite well-known mathematician, especially he was very well-known in his ability to, as a lecturer. He was a very good lecturer. So he was in the Hebrew University. My mother, she, at the beginning, when they came, it took her some time to learn Hebrew. My father, he knew Hebrew from very early age. His family were very Zionist, and when they came to Israel, he knew Hebrew fluently. For her, it took some time, and then she started to work at the Israeli radio in this small apartment of the Russian department. That was a department that they mainly broadcasted for the Jews who were left in the USSR. I don't know if you know, but starting from around 1960 until 1970, Jews were not allowed to go out of the USSR. They were not allowed to speak Hebrew, to read Hebrew, and they used to hear her secretly. She became very, very famous. Like they say, and I heard it so many times, so I guess it's true. When Jews were started to come again in the early 70s, the first place they went was the Western Wall. And the second place, they looked for my mother in the radio building. I had a quite normal childhood, nothing special. I wasn't so normal, but the childhood was quite normal. My brother, um, he learned in high school. His main subject was Eastern and the Arabic language. He knew very well how to speak and read and write Arabic. Then in 1972, he finished his high school and joined the army. At that time, like today, those people who knew very well Arabic used to go to the intelligence, but my brother didn't want to because he wanted to be a fighter. So that time it was a big prestige to be at the tanks unit, and there he went. Year after that, 1973, I was in my 7th grade. You know, well, some of you know that that year Yom Kippur was Friday and Saturday. My brother was supposed to come for that weekend. We are not religious people. We are actually atheists. My family, we don't fast in Yom Kippur, etc. But so my mother prepared a big meal. Then on Thursday, he called us and said that he's not able to come. He didn't say why. He talked with my mother, he talked with my father, also wanted to talk with me, but I didn't want to talk with him because we had a big fight at the last time he was, so I didn't talk with him. And then on Saturday, I think there is no one who lived at that time here in Israel will ever forget this minute, when 10 minutes before 2, all of a sudden, siren all over the country. And the Yom Kippur War began when Syria from the north and Egypt from the south attacked Israel simultaneously. And the war began, and some days passed, and then a week, and then 10 days. We didn't hear anything from Giora. But that wasn't strange. Nobody heard those at that time about their dear ones. About 10 days, 2 weeks after that, after the war started, my parents started to worry, started to make phone calls to other parents of his friends, asked maybe they heard something from their sons. Um, and in October 24, there was the ceasefire, the last day of the war, and still we didn't hear anything about him. A few days after that, in October 29th, one of his good friends, he had a very short leave to go home just for a few hours. His father passed 30 days before that, so they let him to participate with his mother in this, 30 days. And then when he came home, he asked his mother, did you hear anything about the other friends? And then she told him that about Giora, nobody heard. And then he said, how come? That's impossible. I, I saw him. I met him. And then he called my parents and told them that I saw Giora in October 15th in that and that place in Sinai. We talked for a few minutes. Giora was with a towel and jerrycan of water. So that information started to make some questions. And in that time, our biggest hope was that he's a POW. The only thing knew is that he was fighting at the southern front against Egypt. We didn't know any other detail. So, and I remember at that time, like we didn't have television, and my parents bought for the first time a TV because in Jerusalem we could see the Jordanian television, and they showed every day, every evening around 6:30 for half an hour, some interviews with POWs from Egypt. And we were, looking, maybe they will show him or maybe another friend of his. Then about 2, 3 weeks after that, around in the middle of November, one day at the evening time, at the main news in the television, they announced that Israel and Egypt made an agreement of exchanging the prisoners list. And they said that within the next 24 hours, special messengers will knock on every family in every door and we let them know that must say that that was the toughest time, night, day that I remember in my life. I remember myself going to sleep, then waking up and like running to my parents. Did you hear anything? And they said no. I agreed to go to the school only after they promised me that if they will hear something, they will call me. I know from kind of a diary that my father wrote. He started to write this diary in October 17th, in the middle of the war. A mathematician, you know, it's kind of, you know, full with details. That day and that time, I called here and we asked there and we went here. And so I know that in that night, they like decided that they will not kill themselves and they will keep on living for me. So I went to school. I remember that day very clearly, looking at the door, hoping that the secretary will come in and say, Gili, please go home. Your parents are calling you. But that didn't happen. After the few weeks after the war, the IDF established a MIA unit, missing in action. Such a unit wasn't before in the Israeli army. That was the first time, because there were so many cases, hundreds. Actually, at the beginning, there were 1,500 MIAs, but most of them just because of the mess. And then they started to investigate this friend that I told you that said that he saw him. They also hypnotized him for several times, but he was really insisted on his story. I will not tell you the whole story of his disappearance. Actually, it's full with so many details and so many mysteries. Then another mystery popped up when it turned out that at that time the army already knew the number of the tank, and they couldn't find any information about that tank. Actually, it's the only tank until today in the whole of the history of IDF, in all the wars, and that there is no information what happened to it. And the story of my brother's disappearance became famous. Maybe you can say that he was the most famous MIA from that war. I'm talking about first page in the newspapers, you know, main headlines here and there, and many um, rumors. Maybe he was here, somebody saw him there. Then because he knew Russian and he knew Arabic, there was a rumor that maybe he was captured by the Russians or captured by the Egyptians and then handed over to the Russians, etc. Now let me pause for a minute and say this. Before the war, I wasn't in any way involved in, you know, I wasn't interested in politics. I didn't hear the news. I didn't read newspapers. I read newspapers, only the sports column. After the war, after several weeks, I really turned 180 degrees. I was so much involved. And I started to feel not only anger, but really hate. I hated all the Arabs. I wanted to kill all the Arabs. I really looked for revenge. And I thought to myself, how can I revenge? At that time, there were so many demonstrations in Jerusalem, especially against the government. You know, different reasons. They started to have some talks with the Egyptians, and then there wasn't any demonstration that I wasn't there. And after several months, I joined Arab Kana movement, Kach. I hope you all know about it. When I talk in high schools about that, nobody knows what I'm talking about. So I say, you know, like lehava or like that, so they understand. I must say that after several months, I decided that they are not that they are too soft, and I left this movement and I joined another movement. The name of the movement, rarely people know about it, was Dov. Dov, it's Dikui Bogdim, if somebody understands here in Hebrew. I don't know how to translate it. Anyway, it's maybe more right-wing, more fascist movement. Okay, so time passed. And towards the end of the year, of that year, we're talking now about the summer of 1974, my parents decided that it's really beginning to be too much living our apartment was like a train station, especially in weekends. Although my parents were only 15 years in Israel, they knew so many people. And although we don't have almost like, I don't have any family. I never had a grandmother, grandfather, uncles, cousins, etc. But they knew so many, like my mother worked at the radio and so many people knew her. My father, so many students. And my brother, he was very, very connected to different circles in the scouts, in the school, in another school, and in the neighborhood, and it was too much. And they decided, my father decided to take a sabbatical year, and we rented our apartment in Jerusalem, and moved for 1 year to Canada, Toronto. Why Toronto? Because we have some far relatives, very far, but very warm people who they found us an apartment that where we lived, and signed me to a Jewish school. And for my 8th grade, I was in Canada. So I don't have anything special to say about that year. Time passed. My parents tried to make connections with the Red Cross and here and there. In Israel, the MIA unit, after they closed the case, they decided to reopen it and to investigate it, like everything from the beginning, but nothing, no news. And then one day, towards the end of that year, we're talking about June 75, I was sitting in a class and the door of the class was opened and the secretary came in and she said, Gili, please go home. Your parents are calling you. And I went home. We lived very close, just 2-3 minutes walk. And in the living room, I saw my parents with a person who came from the Israeli embassy. And he told us that just several weeks ago, there was an agreement between Israel and Egypt, and they exchanged coffins, bodies, and 39 coffins were handed over to the Israelis. And he said that one of the last, actually the last body that they were able to identify was your son, your brother, Giora. My mother asked, "Are we sure?" We're talking a few days before the DNA days, yeah. And he told us that we can't be sure, but it's 90-something% sureness. And then day after, we were on an airplane and came to Jerusalem. Since our apartment was rented, so they put us in a small hotel in Jerusalem. And a day or 2 days after that, there was the funeral. I remember the headlines in the newspaper. The body of Giora Meisler was found, but the mystery of the tank is still going on. The funeral was huge. Hundreds of people. Let me say just something that about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I completed a personal documentary that I made. The name of the film is Fireflies. And it's a documentary about what happened to my brother, like my brother's story, and what happened to me years after that in the forest. The two stories are combined. So why I'm mentioning this now is because it was really surprising for me to understand while I interviewed so many people for my documentary, colleagues and friends of my parents and that, and friends of Giora, I was quite shocked to realize that actually almost nobody believed that it was his body. The feeling was that like people asked themselves, are they really burying Giora or are they burying his story? Uh, so after the funeral, we came back to Toronto just for 2 weeks, finished our business there and came back to Israel. So I started my 9th grade. My parents managed to sign me to the one of the best schools in Jerusalem, Gymnasia. And the only I was accepted is because the principal was a student of my father. Otherwise, there was no way that they would accept me. And I started my 9th grade. Um, After several, I think after 3 months, one day I wrote something and then I went to a print shop and printed on my expense several thousands of flyers. And then for several weeks, every several days, I woke up very early, which was not easy for me. And I stood in every high school in Jerusalem, and around like 7 o'clock in the morning, waited until 8 over this flyer. And after several weeks, established a new youth movement, very right-wing movement. We used to meet every week. In some place, they let us meet there. It was a Likud building, and we made some activities and demonstrations, and I will not get into it. Towards the end of that year, my 9th grade, one day my parents came to me and said, Gili, we bought a new apartment and we are moving. And like I said at the beginning, it was their dream to separate me and my brother, and you can say that now there is no reason. But there was a reason, because it was so difficult for my mother, especially for her, to be at the same, all the memories, and every time she got inside our room, she started to cry. So we moved just very close, just several streets nearby. A newer apartment, a nicer building, 4 rooms. My father had his own study room. And in that summer, between my 9th and 10th grade, I started to smoke cigarettes a little bit from here and there. And one day when I went down, I saw the gardener. He used to come twice, 3 times a week, taking care of the garden, cleaning the stairs. And then he saw me, and he called me and offered me a cigarette. And I took a cigarette, and we talked a little bit. And then day after, he saw me again, and he gave me a cigarette. And we talked for 10 minutes and started to talk about, and what's your name and what you do. His name is Ali, from East Jerusalem, just a few years older than me. And we had our quality time every day. And every time I left him, I started to think, what's going on here? He's an Arab. How come? Why? What am I doing with an Arab? And that made me think. And after several times, I said to myself, he's such a great guy, and he's such a nice person. And we're laughing, and we're talking serious things. And then I decided, I'm not that kind of person. I refuse to be that kind of person. I don't hate all the blacks, all the women, all the gays, all the Arabs. I'm not that kind of person. I refuse to be that kind of person. So Ali changed my life. And it made me think about, not only about Arabs, but what do I think about the conflict, and how come Israel has its own state, and the Egyptian and the Palestinians not. And the first thing happened, I stopped those meetings of the movement that I by myself established. And then it took some time, but after several months and a year, I completely changed, like from one place to another place. And actually, this is my personal story. And please feel free to say, ask anything.
Thank you, Gili. I wanted to pass you a question. So you were mentioning, the transformation you went through when you were a young person, and I guess you yourself and you in the family forum, you meet a lot of young people. Can you maybe share with us a bit your experience? Do you feel, is there a change during the years you're doing these meetings with the young people, with students?
Yeah, well, Yeah, I'm one of the members in our forum that I give what we call dialogue meetings. We it's not only for youth. I mean, usually it's for high school, 11, 12 grades, but it can be also for adults who come from Europe, from or the States from different reasons, and they invite us, or in the university. So regarding those, sharing my story, the younger people I meet, they are around high school age. It's very interesting. Like, let me just explain that, of course, I'm not doing that alone, but every time we are two, Israeli and Palestinian, and it can be a Palestinian guy or a Palestinian girl, and each of us shares his or her story, and then there's time for questions and etc. So it's funny, it's interesting. Sometimes they tell us that beware in this school. They are very right and expect to hear difficult things, and usually it goes very well because most of the also the youth when they hear both of us, so they really experience some, like, it's an interesting um, sometimes, like, we say to ourselves, even if one person something will change in his mind, so we done what we wanted. It's very difficult for them to it's very difficult for them to uh, um, um, that we're both human, that there is no big difference. And what to say, our Palestinian members are not terrorists, and they are not. They didn't come from terrorist families, and they are human like us. And it's very interesting when you see that. And sometimes the reaction is, okay, so you, like, if they talk to the Palestinian guy, you look good. Okay, you're a good person, but most of the Arabs are that and that. So sometimes we get different reactions, but most of the times we are okay. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Thank you. I have here two questions. I think they're around the same theme, so I'll just read them together. So one question is, beside the conversation with the Arab gardener, what helped you change? The second question was, after you transitioned, have you confronted feelings of hatred and anger again and had to deal with them? And can you say now what helped you separate yourself from these negative feelings?
wait, so many questions. What was the first one?
So beside the conversation with the Arab gardener, can you point of and other things that helped you go through this change?
Well, that was kind of a trigger, I guess. But you see, the hate that I felt, actually, the acknowledge that this, I don't know, hate, let's say, that you feel, will not help and will not change anything. And if you combine that with the feeling, with the other feeling that there is no real big difference, and maybe there is no difference at all, except maybe some culture difference between me and any other. It doesn't matter if he's Jewish or Arab, like we all share the same blood, etc. I think it was mainly here. It's not that I met so many, after that, so many Arabs or Palestinians, and they had different experiences. What was the second question?
Second question was if during your life, or maybe you can focus on your time as a peace activist, you were confronted again with feelings of hatred and anger, and if you can share like how you dealt with it.
No, I must say no. Like I feel I'm not, I'm not a saint. If I feel, I mean, many people, I hear them say, I don't hate anybody. Okay, so like you're lucky. I do hate from time to time things and people, but I must say that I have like I think I matured. So here, I hate Bibi Netanyahu. Okay, it doesn't mean that I don't hate anymore. But if you're asking about Arabs or such, so no, I didn't feel that again. Like no. And the third question?
I think you covered the question. I have here another question. I hope I understand it, but I think it refers like really to the question was how many people share their personal stories, publish a book, or I think maybe we could, I'll direct the questions. I know that we in Combatants for Peace, we had gone through experience of haven't had a documentary movie done about us, and I know that you in the Parent Circle also were part of a documentary movie. Maybe you can share a bit about that, or maybe tell, so what is available in the family forums when it comes to the personal stories that you gather from the families?
First of all, like, I'm one of the things that I'm proud is our new, it's already 2 or almost 3 years, new website in our parent circle. And I really encourage you to go and visit the parencircle.org and sign to our newsletter, etc. So we have a section there with personal stories. Unfortunately, only few now. Until now, we have about 25, if I'm not mistaken, Palestinians and Israelis who shared in writing and also in pictures their personal story. And yeah, there are that I think 2 films that connected to the Parent Circle. It's a good idea to maybe publish a book with lots of stories. The thing is that I must say that bereaved people especially when they're a little bit older, when their grief, like I'm talking maybe more about parents, sometimes have they don't have the strength to, I don't know, sit and write. Some of they do, yeah, but unfortunately only few. So we don't have such a thing, but it's a good idea.
Another question is, in the years you have been active, have you felt a movement in the public sentiment towards your position and purpose?
Sorry, again.
So in other words, the work we are all doing and trying to change the minds of people, do you feel that you're making a change, that this kind of work with also maybe with the memorial event?
That's a good question. We in the parent circle, let me a little bit tell you, we are doing different things. And if you go inside our website and visit and see so many activities, we have a women group, we have youth group, we're doing summer camps for youth. We've done art exhibitions, demonstrations. Every International Women Day, we are trying to do something. Every International Peace Day, etc. We are trying to do every year something. But let's say that our two main activities are dialogue meetings, which I told you about them, and what we call a parallel narrative experience, or the parallel narrative project, which is very, very interesting project. And that's the activity that made me a member in the parent circle. I did it 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about that. What we do is take 30 people, Israelis and 15 Palestinians, who all have something in common. Like maybe we had groups that they were all doctors, all journalists, etc. We had groups that they were all grandmothers. So, and they are meeting for several times, between 6, 8, sometimes 10, it depends on the budget. And they meet from time to time, including weekends. And the aim is that every side will learn something about the other side, personal and national narrative. And let's say that the two peaks of the project are when one day they all go to Yad Vashem. That's the opportunity for the Palestinians to be exposed to the, let's say, the most traumatic event in the Jewish history. And in another day, they all go to one of the Arab villages, one of the almost 500 Arab villages who were destroyed and demolished during what we call our independence war, and what the Palestinians call their Nakba, their catastrophe. So that's the opportunity for the Israelis to be aware of that. And it's really a very interesting project. Now, those two projects I can tell you definitely are changing people. Definitely. For me, the most important thing we do is like what we do now. Let's call it a dialogue meeting. The only thing is that you hear only one side, only me, and you don't see my Palestinian partner. But I think this is really important because, like, just imagine you go to high school and you're talking about people who never saw an Arab. Like today, it's extremely strange. I don't know. I grew up in Jerusalem, and since '67, I saw Palestinians in the street. Here, you know, even if you live in Tel Aviv and you go to Jaffa and you see, but it's different. So I think this is the most important thing we are doing at the Parent Circle. And this parallel project, narrative project that I talked about is really changing people. You can see every group. We've done that, 41 groups multiplied by 30, more than 1,000, 1,200 people. Every group, almost every group, are keeping in touch for years. So yeah, I think like this one-to-one is making a change.
Thank you. We got a couple of questions in general asking about what material, what kind of information we have. My suggestion is really come and visit the Parent Circle website, Combatants for Peace website. Go to the website. You can write emails to us if you have more specific question. I think that's the best way to get information. If it's to get if it's about screenings of documentaries, about personal stories, any other information. If you would like to arrange some kind of a meeting like we do here for your community, you can coordinate it with either one of the organizations. So I encourage you to visit our websites, Facebook pages, and contact us through there. We'll be happy to share information. Right, Gili, are there other resources? I think websites and Facebooks, right? That's the main resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is really good, and our Facebook page, and sign up to our newsletters. And I don't know if there's any other question. I see people here that I know. Shalom Ruti, Shalom Chagit, Shalom Ifat.
I would like to ask.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question. I think it's an important for all of us to hear. I think dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for me personally, sometimes I find it hard to maintain hope. I mean, the hopelessness easily creeps in, especially when in the politic era things gets worse, and you know we have our ups and downs here in the politics. How do you where do you get the hope? Where do you get the energy to keep on doing this work over so many years?
Listen, I'm let's say this. maybe I'll change your question, okay?
Okay.
Like my hope is because I'm an optimistic person. That's why. I'm that kind of person. I'm, yeah. Well, but I think one question people ask us almost after every meeting, do you believe that there will be someday peace with the Palestinians? And this is a good question. And usually what I like, my answer is this. Simply, you have to look at the history. You can go way back, hundreds of years ago. You can go to the last century. I can give you many examples. We can talk about Germany and France. We can talk about North Ireland. We can talk about so many conflicts in different parts of the world. And the conflicts over there are not less bloodshed and hate. And it can be between two different religious groups or fights about territory. And you see, maybe after some years, maybe after decades, that there isn't any war anymore and they made some kind of a peace agreement. Like, let's say, let's even not go back so back, yeah? Let's talk about the recent time. Let's see, like, I must say, I used to give the example of North Koreans and like, but now I'm not sure, yeah, but who believed a year ago when there were talks between the US and North Korea? Sudan and South Sudan, a war that goes on, I don't know how many deaths. Eritrea and Ethiopia and Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan, who, like, for so many years, Israel and Germany, like the embassy of German here in Tel Aviv was already at the 50s or 40s. Who believed it? Now, so my answer is that it's not only that I'm optimistic, but I'm also, I think, realistic. If you see what's going on in the history, and nobody will convince me that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is something else. It's something different that we never saw. It will take time, unfortunately. I think it's mainly because we don't have two brave leaders from both sides. I think this is the main reason. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Gili. I'd like to acknowledge as a remark of one of our guests here says, but it takes committed leaders to realize that no one wins a war, everybody loses. So I think we all agree with that. Another question just came in again. Give me a second. So it's again about meeting with the young people. So the question is, how much do you feel that when you meet young people, you meet what their parents were, putting in them, how much of it do you think it's their own authentic, or maybe it's, I don't know, how
Yeah, I understand.
yeah.
It's a good question, and I really must say that I think it depends. And then like my parents didn't raise me to hate Arabs, and the life made me. Um, Also, my teachers didn't do that. I hear so many times that that the Palestinians are teaching their kids to hate, etc. Either in the education system or at their home. I think maybe everything is true and nothing is true. It's that it's so individual. Like it can happen for so many different reasons. Um, so I really don't have really answer why is that happening. I feel that because I was there hating, I can understand, I can relate. Sometimes maybe it's easier for me to try to convince or say the right things, but I think only time and the life experience will change, and just maybe meeting personal meetings, one with the other, one with the person who is different from you. I think this is the main way to change people way of thinking.
There's a question about the curriculum in schools in either side, in Israel and in Palestine. I know that in the last couple of years, there were a couple of times that schools invited you from the parent circles to come and meet students, and there was political and in the media was an attack on the decisions. So right, correct me, right? So there were a few times you had, like, you
Yeah.
were school directors canceled your meetings. I know from my town, at least for 1-2 years, my high school also used to have you every year, and I know that some students wouldn't come to the school that day in my town when they knew that there were coming Israeli Palestinians from the parent circle. So if you can maybe tell about 1 or 2 cases that things were canceled here in Israel, and if you have information about in Palestinian schools.
Well, first of all, to the education system in Palestine, we are not able to go in. It's considered as a politic thing, and they are not allowing it. We do have dialogue meetings in Palestine, but for adults or students or women, and in private homes, etc. Not in schools, unfortunately, not yet. We had some from time to time in East Jerusalem. Yeah, well, listen, until today, we started doing dialogue meetings in 2001. We did more than 5,000, maybe 5,500 meetings. If you count the audience, it's more than 200,000. Yeah, in the recent years, the right wing are making noise, and from time to time succeeding in convincing the principal or the the parents to refuse. It rarely happens, really rarely. The main reason is because of the Memorial Day ceremony. I'm sure about that. We are paying price because of this ceremony. People are, and I think it's also a problem with us, and when I have the opportunity, I say this in our staff meetings, etc. I think we are not enough explaining that we are not encouraging terror, etc.
You have here a challenging question. It's a hot topic. So the question is, do you think the BDS movement furthers the aims of achieving peace, or does it makes it more difficult?
Sorry, again?
So the question is about BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanction movement.
Listen, I'm not the person to ask about BDS. I must say, I don't understand exactly what BDS wants. I read their three main things that they believe in. Two of the things I can maybe relate, the other not really. It's not that I'm anti-BDS, I'm not for BDS. I really don't understand what's going on here. I'm not the person to ask about BDS.
Good. Thank you very much, Gili, for the time you took for sharing your story. I'm sure it's never easy to bring up again memories of the pain.
It was interesting for me as well. I hope for you too.